If you've ever stared at a wall of tangled cables, wondered whether you're paying too much for a smart box, and then hesitated because you're not sure if it will actually simplify life instead of adding another layer of tech headache, you're in good company. Most people buying a home NAS are looking for something that just works, something reliable enough to hold family photos, stream movies, and maybe run a few containers for a side hustle, without turning your living room into a server room. The fear of spending good money on a device that sits half filled with drives and never sees a single backup is real, and that's why I'm taking a step back from the spec sheet and talking about what the Synology DiskStation DS923 Plus actually feels like when you plug it into your everyday routine. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First, let's talk about the kind of house that really needs a unit like this. If you have a handful of 4K movies, a growing library of raw photos from a DSLR, and perhaps a small media server for the family, a NAS becomes the central hub that takes the stress out of juggling external drives. The DS923 Plus is aimed squarely at that home office meets home entertainment crowd. It's not a tiny 2-bay box that can only hold a couple of terabytes, nor is it a rack-mount behemoth meant for a data center. It's a 4-bay chassis that, out of the box, ships empty so you have the freedom to pick the drives that fit your budget and capacity needs. The included 1TB M.2 NVMe SSD is meant for cache, which means faster access to the files you touch most often without you having to think about where to put the SSD. What does that mean in practice? Imagine you're editing a video on a laptop that pulls source footage from the NS. With the SSD cache enabled, the first few minutes of playback are buttery smooth, even though the bulk of the data lives on the 16 terabytes of HDD space you'll install later. That's a real, tangible benefit for creators who don't want to wait for a spin-up every time they scrub through a timeline. If you're just a family that streams movies from Plex or MB, the cache helps with quick thumbnail generation and instant startup of the first episode, so you're not stuck watching a loading bar. The heart of the DS923 Plus is a Ryzen R1600 2-core CPU running at 2.6 GHz with a turbo boost up to 3.1 GHz, paired with up to 32 GB of DDR4 ECC memory. In plain language, that's more than enough muscle to run multiple Docker containers, a personal cloud sync, or a surveillance system for a few IP cameras all at the same time. I've seen users set up a small Nextcloud instance, a download station for torrents, and a backup target for their Windows PCs without any noticeable slowdown. The ECC memory gives a safety net against bit flips, which is something most hobbyists overlook but can be a lifesaver when you're storing irreplaceable family archives. Now, let's be clear about the trade-offs. The DS923 Plus doesn't come with any drives pre-installed, which is a double-edged sword. On one hand, you avoid paying for a one-size-fits-all storage solution that might be overkill or underkill for you. On the other, you have to buy the drives separately and do the installation yourself. If you're not comfortable opening a chassis and snapping in 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch drives, that could be a stumbling block. The process itself is straightforward: 4 drive bays with toolless trays, a couple of screws for the SSD, and a simple web-based setup wizard that walks you through volume creation, user permissions, and app installation. Most first-time users get a functional system up within an hour, but that still assumes you have the drives on hand and a spare slot in your network. Another practical point is the network side. The unit offers two 1 GB LAN ports, which you can bond for increased bandwidth or redundancy. That's great if you have a gigabit-capable router and you intend to stream 4K content to several devices simultaneously. However, if you're still on a 100 megabits per second home network, you won't see the full benefit of the dual ports. In that case, you're essentially paying for future-proofing rather than immediate performance gains. Who should walk away? If you're looking for a plug-and-play external drive that you can stick on your desk and start copying files, a Synology might feel like overkill. The learning curve of DSM, DiskStation Manager, is gentle, but there's still a mental shift from just copy and paste to configure shared folders, set up users, and think about backup rotations. For a single laptop user who just wants an extra terabyte of backup, a simple USB-C external SSD would be cheaper and less fiddly. Also, if you don't have any plans to run apps beyond basic file sharing, the extra CPU and memory may never be used, meaning you're paying for horsepower you won't need. On the flip side, if you're already juggling multiple devices, want a centralized place